Imagine two people get the exact same minor physical wound on their arm.
Right, just a standard scrape or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And they go about their day, but with one major difference. The first person sits down and writes a creative poem. The second person, well, they write a mundane to-do list.
Okay.
So when doctors measure their healing a few days later, the poet's wound has literally physically closed and healed faster.
Wow.
Yeah. And the systemic inflammation in their blood is actually lower. Just writing a story accelerated their cellular repair.
That is wild.
Right. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We're exploring a really fascinating stack of research titled Strategic Protocols for Cellular Longevity and Neurological Resilience.
Quite a mouthful.
It is. But our mission for you, the listener, is to completely bypass all that standard generic health advice. We're looking into how targeted and sometimes bizarre-sounding environmental inputs can completely reprogram your biology.
Yeah, and the underlying premise across all these sources is that the human body isn't just this passive machine that wears down over time. I mean, it is a highly sensitive receptor array.
Meaning it's always taking in data.
Exactly. Your biology and your neurology are constantly adapting to whatever modern environmental signals you feed them. So by manipulating those specific inputs, whether it's, acupressure, or just the way you sit in your living room, or even engaging with the arts, you can dictate massive, quantifiable outputs in your health span and mental resilience.
So let's start at the absolute foundation of that signaling process, which is, of course, your DNA.
Right, the baseline.
The sources highlight the clinical work of Dr. Cara Fitzgerald, and her protocol involves consuming 7 to 11 cups daily of incredibly specific polyphenol-rich foods and herbs.
That's a lot of cups.
It really is. We're talking about green tea specifically for a compound called EGCG alongside, like rosemary, marjoram, and blueberries.
Yeah, and the goal here isn't just basic nutrition. It's an actual structural intervention at the genetic level using what are called methylation adaptogens.
Right, which sounds super technical. Can you unpack that?
Sure. So to understand why this is so potent, we have to look at the mechanism of DNA methylation itself. Your DNA strands are covered in millions of chemical tags called methyl groups.
Okay.
You can think of them as like physical speed bumps sitting on top of the genetic code. And as we age, those speed bumps drift.
So they move around.
Yeah, exactly. We lose them in places where we desperately need them, like over tumor-promoting genes, and we accumulate them in places that suppress healthy cellular function.
Oh, I see.
So Fitzgerald's research focuses on how these specific plant polyphenols act as biochemical directors. They supply the raw materials and the signaling instructions to put those speed bumps exactly back where they belong, clamping down on pro-aging gene expression.
That makes sense. It's almost like looking at your DNA as a player piano.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah. So the piano itself, the keys, the hammers, that's your fixed genetic code. You can't change the hardware you were born with.
Right.
But these polyphenols, they act as the sheet music.
Yeah.
They slide into the machinery and physically instruct the piano not to play the chords associated with aging. But, can eating blueberries and drinking green tea really rewind the biological clock that quickly?
Well, the clinical data backing that up is profound. Dr. Fitzgerald actually conducted a world-first randomized controlled trial using healthy middle-aged men.
Okay.
And the control group just engaged in standard healthy behaviors, including regular exercise. But the intervention group adopted this highly targeted, polyphenol-dense functional medicine diet.
And the results?
In just 8 weeks, the intervention group reversed their Horvath epigenetic clocks by over 3 years.
Wait, really? Winding back biological age by 3 years and 8 weeks? That sounds like science fiction.
It does, but the Horvath clock measures that exact methylation drift we were just talking about. It basically proves that aging isn't just the passive passage of time. It is a programmatic, software-driven phenomenon.
That is mind-blowing.
Right. By flooding the body with these specific adaptogens, they weren't just, cooling off short-term inflammation. They were fundamentally rewriting the operating system of their cells to run a younger biological program.
Which naturally leads us to the other side of the metabolic coin. If you can rewrite the software by adding specific nutrient signals, then you can force the hardware to clean and upgrade itself by strategically restricting other nutrients.
Exactly.
Moving from adding biochemical signals to restricting them brings us to Craig Emmerich's protein-sparing modified fasts, or PSMF.
Right, PSMF.
The protocol here is taking 1 to 3 days a week and eating almost exclusively lean protein. You keep carbohydrates near absolute zero, and fats are incredibly low.
Right.
We're talking maybe 20 to 30 grams, just enough for the body to absorb fat-soluble vitamins.
Yeah, and the other days of the week, you just eat your normal maintenance calories?
Wait, so by sneaking in just enough protein, we're basically tricking the body into taking out the cellular trash and burning fat without it realizing it's starving.
That's the perfect way to put it. The brilliance of PSMF lies in exploiting how the body partitions fuel. See, fat and carbohydrates are energy macros, but protein is primarily a structural macro. It's a building block.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when you deprive the body of external energy macros but supply ample protein, you force an internal metabolic pivot. The body still demands high energy to run the brain and the organs, right? So it aggressively liberates stored body fat.
But without eating up your muscle.
Precisely.
Mhm.
Because of the high dietary protein intake, you prevent the severe muscle breakdown and that awful metabolic slowdown that usually accompanies traditional starvation diets.
So it's basically a biohack for autophagy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because usually autophagy is triggered by total fasting. The body gets so desperate for resources, it starts dismantling its own damaged senescent cells. It's like, well, like a city tearing down abandoned crumbling buildings just to use the bricks to build new hospitals.
I love these analogies today. Yeah, Emmerich's protocol spikes those exact same markers of cellular cleanup, but without the metabolic panic of a prolonged water fast.
The clinical applications of this are staggering, honestly. The sources detail a case study of a patient named Tyler who weighed 645 pounds.
Wow, 645.
Yeah. But interestingly, he exhibited normal fasting insulin and glucose.
Wait, how is that possible at that weight?
Well, he possessed an incredibly rare genetic trait causing fat cell hyperplasia. So instead of his fat cells overfilling and becoming insulin resistant, his body just infinitely created brand new fat cells to store energy.
Oh, wow. So he had like infinite storage capacity without the typical metabolic syndrome fallout.
Right. But those millions of cells were still dangerously engorged. By implementing these high-protein, low-energy PSMF days, they rapidly shrank Tyler's adipose tissue.
That is incredible.
It is. It dramatically lowered his circulating triglycerides without crashing his metabolic engine.
And for you, the average person listening, this protocol represents a really powerful defense against metabolic syndrome. Preserving lean muscle mass while systematically forcing the body to empty overstuffed fat cells ensures your metabolic engine runs hot and your cellular structures just remain pristine.
Okay, so optimizing that internal cellular engine is incredible, but that engine operates inside a physical, mechanical chassis.
Right, your skeleton.
Exactly. And if the skeletal framework breaks down, all the metabolic health in the world won't keep you independent. So the sources transition us from dietary protocols to structural protocols, specifically focusing on the way you sit on the floor.
This one is so simple but so effective.
Yeah, Dr. Kelly Starrett advocates for a dead simple intervention.
Yeah.
Just spend 20 to 30 minutes every single evening sitting on the ground while watching TV. And you constantly shift through end range positions, like sitting cross-legged, kneeling, or side saddle.
It sounds deceptively basic, I know, but it addresses a catastrophic environmental mismatch.
Our comfortable modern couches, basically.
Right. Modern chairs and couches positionally inhibit our joints. When you spend your entire day suspended at a 90-degree angle, in a car, at a desk, on a couch, your tissues adapt to that rigid mold.
They literally get stuck that way.
Exactly. Floor sitting introduces dynamic loading. It forces your fascial networks and musculature to actually support your skeleton against gravity. When you shift around on the floor, you are actively driving the head of the femur deeply into the acetabulum, which maintains the structural congruency of your hips.
So how does shifting around on the living room floor actually prevent a fatal fall decades later? Like you're just watching Netflix.
Well, you're preventing the joint capsules from shrinking. The sources point out that Japanese populations who culturally maintain floor-sitting traditions for eating and sleeping exhibit near-zero rates of hip and lower back osteoarthritis.
Near zero.
Yeah, near zero, alongside drastically lower fall risks.
That's wild. And the clinical proxy for this is the sit and rise test, right? Which is a brutally accurate predictor of all-cause mortality.
Yes. The number one reason elderly individuals enter assisted living is the inability to autonomously get up from the ground.
That makes total sense.
Maintaining the capacity to lower your center of gravity to the floor and stand back up without using your hands, that requires massive tissue resilience and end-range joint mobility. So floor sitting isn't an exercise. It is a daily, mandatory biological input.
The ultimate proxy for physical freedom.
Exactly. If you fail to demand that end-range mobility from your tissues, your nervous system simply stops allocating resources to maintain it. It's a classic use it or lose it scenario.
And the nervous system governs everything, doesn't it? The physical rigidity we develop from sitting in chairs isn't just a mechanical issue. It sends chronic tension signals up the kinetic chain directly into our neurology.
Oh, absolutely.
And if chronic stress is constantly firing, it destroys all the physical and metabolic gains we've discussed so far. Which brings us to Jessica Ortner's work on EFT tapping to hack the physical stress response.
Right. So the protocol involves a 9-point acupressure sequence.
Yeah.
You basically use 2 fingers to physically tap specific nerve-dense pathways like the side of the hand, the eyebrow, the collarbone, while verbally acknowledging a specific stressor, followed immediately by a reassuring affirmation.
I have to admit, when I first read this, the optics of tapping your face while talking out loud to yourself felt a bit, woo-woo.
Oh, for sure. It reads more like daytime television than a rigorous neurological protocol.
Right. But you're saying fMRI scans literally show brain craving centers shutting down. Like, what is the actual physical mechanism here?
The skepticism is entirely warranted until you look at the mechanism, which is rooted in mechanotransduction and memory reconsolidation.
Okay, break that down for us.
Physical experiences of trauma and chronic stress are locked into the nervous system. When you tap these specific mechanoreceptors, you are applying physical pressure that converts into an electrical signal. That calming piezoelectric pulse travels up the afferent nerve pathways directly to the amygdala.
So you're intercepting the threat signal.
Exactly. You are actively verbalizing a stressful trigger, which normally causes the amygdala to flood the body with cortisol. But simultaneously, you're sending a manual mechanical override signal that says, we are actually safe.
Wow. So that combination allows the brain to reconsolidate the memory?
Yes. It permanently overrides the neural pathway associated with that stressor, binding it to a lowered anxiety response. The clinical trials are amazing. They show a 43% reduction in cortisol levels in tapping cohorts.
43% is massive.
It drastically outperforms the 19% reduction you typically see in standard psychoeducation. And meta-analyses on PTSD demonstrate huge effect sizes, with 90% of veterans dropping below the clinical threshold for PTSD after 30 sessions.
That case study of the Navy veteran perfectly illustrates that mind-body bridge. He suffered from severe chronic back pain and insomnia originating from a bullet wound.
Right.
And obviously the structural damage of the bullet was permanent. But by utilizing tapping, he degraded the amplified neurological pain signals his brain was continuously generating in response to the initial trauma.
Yeah, the mechanical intervention dialed down the electrical storm in his nervous system, which allowed him to finally get some sleep.
That is just incredible.
And in the context of longevity, mitigating that electrical storm is paramount. Chronic cortisol exposure is deeply corrosive. I mean, it degrades tissue, it disrupts sleep architecture, and it turns on inflammatory gene expression.
So by mechanically hacking the amygdala's alarm system, you protect your body's electrical grid from the persistent wear and tear of modern chronic stress.
You nailed it.
Lowering that systemic neurological stress is crucial. But our brains also face the sheer friction of daily cognitive processing. We live in an era of infinite choices, which causes massive decision fatigue.
Oh, definitely.
So the sources introduce a cognitive protocol to protect our brain's processing bandwidth called satisficing, which draws on the work of David Epstein and Nobel laureate Herbert Simon.
Right, satisficing. It recognizes that the human prefrontal cortex has a finite energy capacity. The protocol requires establishing strict good enough criteria for low-stakes decisions.
Okay.
And the moment an option meets those predefined parameters, you execute the decision and move on. You abandon the search for a theoretically perfect alternative.
It's like spending an hour scrolling Netflix to find the perfect movie, and by the time you pick one, you're too exhausted to watch it.
We've all been there.
Right. But how do we actually train ourselves to accept a 6.5 out of 10 without feeling like we're settling?
Well, it feels like settling until you understand the physiological cost of maximizing. When you attempt to constantly optimize trivial choices, you fall victim to Fredkin's paradox.
Fredkin's paradox.
Yeah. It states that humans will expend the greatest amount of time and cognitive energy agonizing over decisions where the options are virtually identical in utility. You burn high-grade neuroglucose, trying to find a microscopic difference between two brands of paper towels.
Oh man, that is so true. David Epstein applied this exact concept to cure his own debilitating writing paralysis. He launched a newsletter with a hard, uncompromising rule. His effort level was capped at a 6.5 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah, if a draft hit that metric, he published it immediately. By systematically removing the pressure of perfection, he not only published consistently, but he diluted his neurotic maximizing tendencies across his entire life.
The longevity implications here are significant too. Psychological metrics consistently show that satisficers experience lower daily anxiety and greater overall happiness compared to maximizers.
Which saves the brain over the long haul.
Exactly. Over decades, guarding your cognitive bandwidth against Fredkin's paradox protects the brain from chronic psychological stress and the subsequent neuroinflammation caused by task-switching fatigue. You are actively preventing your cognitive engine from burning itself out on trivialities.
I love that. Okay, so we've built up robust defenses. We're rewriting DNA with polyphenols, clearing metabolic waste with targeted protein, maintaining mechanical joint congruency on the floor, intercepting stress signals with physical tapping, and protecting cognitive bandwidth by satisficing.
That's quite the list.
It is. But we end today with a protocol that shifts us from defense to active physiological repair. The sources point to Professor Daisy Fancourt's research, calling this the fifth pillar of health.
Arts engagement.
Exactly.
The protocol involves consistently integrating multisensory creative activities into your routine. And this isn't just passive consumption like scrolling social media.
Right.
It requires active cognitive participation. We're talking about reading deep fiction, attending a symphony, learning choreography, or engaging in expressive journaling.
It's fascinating because society frames the arts as a luxury. It's a hobby you indulge in if you have leftover time on a Sunday. But Fancourt's research proves that interacting with complex narratives is actually a biological necessity.
It really is. The mind-body connection operates on a literal neuroendocrine superhighway. When you engage with the arts, the narrative anticipation, wondering how a melody will resolve or how a protagonist will survive, it drives a highly specific dopamine release.
Okay.
And this complex cognitive stimulation activates the vagus nerve, increasing vagal tone.
And that increased vagal tone is what bridges the gap to the immune system.
Precisely. High vagal tone actively suppresses the production of inflammatory cytokines. Cytokines are those signaling molecules that ramp up systemic inflammation.
I see.
So when narrative engagement dials down those inflammatory markers, the body can immediately redirect its metabolic resources away from systemic defense and toward localized physical tissue repair.
Which brings us full circle to that wild punch biopsy study we opened with. Patients were given identical minor wounds. The ones assigned to perform expressive, creative writing daily healed measurably faster than the control group writing about time management.
It's just amazing.
So going to a live concert or writing a poem isn't just a nice way to relax. It literally closes a physical wound on your skin faster. Lowering the systemic cytokine storm through creative expression physically accelerates healing.
And epidemiological data reinforces that micro-level healing on a macro scale. Large-scale studies reveal a 31% lower mortality risk for individuals who actively engage in the arts.
31%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Furthermore, epigenetic tests show that regular arts engagement decelerates biological aging at the DNA level with an effect size comparable to vigorous daily exercise. It proves unequivocally that our emotional creative experiences are physically tethered to cellular regeneration.
So synthesizing this deep dive for you, the blueprint for longevity and resilience is vastly more intricate than just generic diet and exercise advice. It's a highly targeted toolkit.
It really is.
You use methylation adaptogens, like green tea and blueberries, to rewrite the aging code on your DNA. You implement protein-sparing modified fasts to dismantle senescent cells without crashing your metabolism. You sit on the floor to dynamically load your hips and secure your mechanical independence.
And don't forget tapping.
Right. You physically tap mechanoreceptors to short-circuit the amygdala's cortisol response. You practice satisficing to preserve cognitive bandwidth, and you actively engage with the arts to stimulate the vagus nerve and accelerate immune repair.
It demands a complete paradigm shift in how we view our surroundings, which leaves you with a final thought to consider. If something as intangible as writing a creative story can physically accelerate the healing of a wound on your arm, and simply shifting how you sit on the floor can dictate your physical freedom decades later, what other seemingly minor everyday aspects of your modern environment are secretly dictating your biological destiny without you even realizing it?
That is such a profound question. It certainly makes you look at your daily routine through an entirely new lens. The instructions to build this house aren't just wooden nails. They are the biochemical signals in your tea, the mechanical forces on your floorboards, and the physiological power of a good story. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.